Any person who believes that Alaska is a desolate land and nothing more than that, they are wrong, very wrong.
Alaska holds within its borders a tapestry of mysteries that have intrigued explorers, adventurers, and storytellers for centuries. With its vast stretches of untamed wilderness, rugged mountains, and icy expanses, perhaps not surprising given that Alaska has America's most unforgiving wilderness. But the figures are simply jaw-dropping. Over 60,000 people have gone missing, without a trace, in this area since 1988. In other words, our last frontier is just a vast and beautiful death trap. From inexplicable disappearances to eerie phenomena, Alaska was shrouded in an air of intrigue, with a bunch of speculations about paranormal activity or natural forces beyond human understanding. But amidst the mystery and the unknown, secrets lie buried beneath layers of snow and ice, waiting to be unearthed by those brave enough to seek them. One such mystery came to light when a former U.S. official unveiled that deep underground, the Alaskan wilderness, may lie a ginormous black pyramid hidden by a top-secret government facility.
I can only speculate that the Black Pyramid was put there by the same people or aliens that built the ones in Giza.
Ex-counterintelligence agent Doug Muchler never intended to stumble upon the alleged spooky tomb. But, in September 1989, the espionage and terrorism specialist was posted to Fort Richardson on the outskirts of Anchorage, and his life changed forever. The first thing that any agent would do is find their bearings for the area of operation, and since this was decades ago, Google wasn't around to help. As Doug pulled out his old-school map, he said he noticed a whited-out enclave in the mountains which had not been filled in, and his suspicions were immediately raised. With his counterintelligence background, he knew they were hiding something. But life as an intelligence officer meant that you worked on a need-to-know basis. Doug quickly let his suspicions slide. Fast forward to 1992, and China had just set off its biggest ever underground nuclear explosion, 70 times the explosive power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Shockwaves were reportedly felt as far as Alaska and picked up by earthquake analyzing equipment, and a local TV news station reported on an eerie finding. They claimed a giant subterranean pyramid had shown up on the equipment. The agent recalled the news anchor reporting, "In Alaska, a pyramid was found larger than the one in Giza, eclipsing it by almost 70 feet. Its position correlated exactly with the whited-out area on the map." The next evening, the agent waited eagerly for a follow-up report that never came. Baffled at the radio silence, Doug headed down to grab a copy of the report at a local station. That station manager allegedly denied that the story was ever put out. Meanwhile, a junior reporter overheard the conversation and anxiously pulled Doug aside. "Two guys came in and took the tapes," the counterintelligence officer said she told him, which to him meant one thing: they were burying the report. A year passed with the events still whirling around Doug's mind when, in 1993, he made the pilgrimage to Fort Meade in Maryland, the home of an extensive collection of military records. The archivist at the facility noted the case and led him to where the redacted documents were situated.
I went into the second drawer, saw the Alaska folder. I took it out, didn't know what it was, and didn't know what it contained, counterintelligence ed, but I brought it back and sat down.
Moments later, two conspicuous-looking guys came over and said, "You're not authorized to have that," before grabbing the papers of the cloak and dagger operation. Doug deemed that his journey to the truth had come to an end. All the while, his hunch remained. Almost 2 decades later, Doug reached out for help from Emmy award-winning documentarian and investigative journalist, Linda Moulton Howe. She became renowned for her work as a ufologist and advocate of a number of conspiracy theories which swept America. Linda picked up the phone and began calling anybody who might know something about the giant pyramid and who could substantiate Doug's wild claims. Hope was beginning to dwindle until she was contacted by an anonymous figure. In the words of Linda, she got a call from somebody on the East Coast about how there was a huge pyramid underground in Alaska, of such age that no one knows. He named it the Dark Pyramid. The man's descriptions finally offered Doug a glimmer of evidence about the elusive pyramid. Rising ominously from the stark landscape, this architectural anomaly stands as a mystery that shroud our planet. Standing approximately 2,000 feet tall, the Alaska Black Pyramid is a colossal structure constructed entirely of black granite. Its origins remain shrouded in mystery, with no definitive record of its builders or purpose. The pyramid's sheer size and remote location have made it a subject of intense speculation and intrigue. One of the most striking aspects of the Alaska Black Pyramid is its location. Situated in a remote region of Alaska, far from any major population centers, accessing the site presents a considerable challenge. The harsh climate and treacherous terrain deter all but the most determined explorers from venturing near its vicinity. The pyramid's construction defies conventional explanations. The precision with which the massive granite blocks are assembled suggests a level of craftsmanship beyond the capabilities of ancient civilizations. Some theories posit that the pyramid may be the work of an advanced, prehistoric civilization that once inhabited the region. Others speculate that it could be the product of extraterrestrial intervention, citing its otherworldly appearance and enigmatic origins. Adding to the mystique of the Alaska Black Pyramid are the various legends and myths that surround it. Local indigenous tribes have passed down tales of the pyramid for generations, often imbuing it with supernatural significance. Some believe that the structure holds mystical powers or serves as a portal to other dimensions. Others warn of ancient curses that befall those who dare to disturb its slumber. Despite numerous expeditions and investigations, the secrets of the Alaska Black Pyramid remain elusive. Conspiracy theorists and amateur sleuths scour satellite imagery and analyze obscure texts in search of clues that might unlock the pyramid's mysterious origin. But the allure of the Alaska Black Pyramid extends beyond its enigmatic origins. Pyramids have fascinated humanity for millennia, not just because of their architectural grandeur, but also due to the enigmatic aura surrounding their alleged mystical powers. One of the most intriguing theories about pyramids involves their purported ability to harness and manipulate electromagnetic energy. The concept stems from the geometric properties of pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza, which has a precise and mathematically significant design. It's believed that the shape of the pyramid, with its sloping sides meeting at a point, creates a natural geometric resonator. This resonator is said to amplify and focus electromagnetic energy, much like an antenna or a lens concentrates light. Proponents of this theory suggest that ancient civilizations, with their advanced understanding of geometry and natural energies, intentionally constructed pyramids as energy-gathering structures. They believe that pyramids were strategically placed at specific locations on the Earth's energetic grid to tap into and channel the planet's natural electromagnetic fields. Furthermore, some researchers claim that the internal structure of pyramids, particularly the chambers and passageways within, may have been designed to enhance the concentration and flow of electromagnetic energy. Certain measurements and proportions found within the Great Pyramid, such as the King's Chamber and its relationship to the Earth's dimensions, are often cited as evidence of this deliberate design. Moreover, anecdotal accounts and experimental studies have suggested that pyramids possess unique properties that affect electromagnetic fields. For instance, individuals have reported experiencing unusual sensations or heightened states of consciousness when inside or near pyramid structures. Some experiments have shown that placing objects inside a pyramid-shaped enclosure can have effects such as preserving food, sharpening blades, or even promoting healing. The final most serious claim to the proposition of pyramid power is Ukrainian physicist Dr. Volodymyr Krasnoholovets. Dr. Krasnoholovets was a theoretical physicist and senior scientist for over 20 years at the Institute of Physics in Ukraine. This institute was the premier military research institution of the former Soviet Union, and Dr. Krasnoholvets helped develop instrumentation and new research technology. Dr. Krasnoholvets' specialty is condensed matter physics. However, the foundations of physics are also in the area of his interests. In this line of research, combining knowledge of condensed matter with the main regulations of quantum physics, he has constructed sub-microscopic quantum mechanics developed in the real space. The theory constructed considers the real space as a tessellation of primordial cells, or balls, or superparticles, which are elementary blocks of nature. Whether one feels the need to consider Dr. Krasnoholvets a genius or a mad scientist, his findings coincide with ancient theological traditions and claims of the pyramids within the cultures from which they were constructed, as well as the consistent stream of research into pyramid power, or more aptly, pyramid physics. His theories also speak loudly for the possibility that the Dark Pyramid could have been picked up by the White Alice communications systems in Alaska, and that, as lore would have it, the pyramid itself conducts and transmits enough electromagnetic energy to theoretically power the entire country of Canada, or even more depending on who one asks. Could it be that pyramids were constructed by ancient man in order to conduct more electromagnetic energy on a global scale, perhaps even in order to benefit their personal, cognitive, and spiritual capabilities? It sounds far-fetched, but it also sounds far-fetched to have hundreds of pyramids located all across the ancient Earth. If they are conducting this electromagnetic energy, what connection does that have with human consciousness? If it has a connection to human consciousness, then why is there public secrecy? What could their use be in today's society? In the end, one must focus on the issues at hand and not let wonder and speculation pull the attention from what is truly important. Regardless, this information poses many questions that demand to be asked. How could there be similar ancient pyramids all across the globe from separate and isolated cultures? Why would those that have been discovered outside of Egypt and Alaska not been widely recognized? There seems to be something there, and it undoubtedly involves the military dating back to the Cold War. In this politically driven society, so full of corruption and secrecy, one must ask themselves if they believe their government is capable of worldwide deception, capable of creating an entire backstory to cover a massive truth dating back to the beginning of man? In addition, don't forget that according to the National UFO Reporting Center, since 1998, there have been over 500,000 reported UFOs in Alaska, with a majority of sightings in the Alaska Triangle. One of the best documented UFO cases ever happened in the skies above Alaska regarded the extraordinary flight of Japan Airlines cargo flight 1628. 3 UFOs played tag with the plane for 50 minutes while they were visually observed by a sometimes terrified flight crew. During the last 30 minutes, the UFOs were tracked on military and civilian radar, and the entire encounter was verified by a high-level administrator of the FAA. The incident received media coverage all over the world. Here's what happened. Japan Airlines. Captain Kenju Terauchi was an ex-fighter pilot and senior airline pilot with more than 10,000 hours flight experience. He was assigned to fly a Japan Airlines cargo flight from Paris to Reykjavik, Anchorage, and on to Tokyo. On November 17th, 5:09 p.m. Alaska time, the Anchorage Air Route Traffic Control Center contacted JL 1628, which at that time was about 104 miles northeast of Fort Yukon. The flight controller asked the pilot to adjust his heading so the plane would pass south of Fort Yukon and Fairbanks. The co-pilot turned the plane to the left about 15 degrees. Captain Terauchi, sitting on the left side of the cockpit, saw unidentified lights out his side window to the left and below. He thought they were military planes and ignored them. After a few minutes, he realized that these unidentified aircraft were pacing him. Flight 1628 contacted the Anchorage Center twice in rapid succession and asked if there were any other aircraft in the area. The Anchorage Center responded that there were no military aircraft, and ground radar did not show any aircraft other than Flight 1628. Then the two lights began to move in an erratic manner. Terauchi recollected in his official report to the FAA.
The distance from the lights was far enough from us, and we felt no immediate danger. I thought perhaps it is a UFO. The lights were still moving strangely. Most unexpectedly, two spaceships appeared directly in front of the plane, shooting off lights. The inside cockpit shined brightly, and I felt the warmth of the UFO's thrusters on my face. Then, 3 to 7 seconds later, the fire, like from jet engines, stopped and became a small circle of lights as they began to fly in level flight at the same speed as we were. The middle of the body of the ship sparked an occasional stream of lights, like a charcoal fire. Its shape was a square, flying 500 feet to 1,000 feet in front of us, very slightly higher in altitude than us. Its size was about the same size as the body of a DC-8, similar in size to a Boeing 707. It is impossible for any man-made machine to make a sudden appearance in front of a jumbo jet that is flying 910 kilometers per hour and to move along in a formation paralleling our aircraft. But we did not feel threatened or in danger. Honestly, we were simply astounded. I have no idea why they came so close to us. There was a pale white flat light in the direction where the ships flew away, pacing us. The Anchorage Center replied that they saw nothing on their radar. I set our digital weather radar distance to 20 miles, radar angle to horizon. There it was, on the screen. A large green round object had appeared 7 or 8 miles away, in the direction of the object. We arrived at the sky above the Eielson Air Force Base and Fairbanks. It was a clear night. We were just above the bright city light, and we checked the pale white light behind us. There was a silhouette of a gigantic spaceship. We must get away quickly.
A terrified Captain Terauchi, in coordination with the Anchorage Center, attempted evasive maneuvers such as flying in a circle and changing altitude. The gigantic UFO, later described by Terauchi as the size of 2 aircraft carriers, shadowed Flight 1628 through all maneuvers. Terauchi wondered and feared as to their purpose. Anchorage Center then offered to scramble a military jet, but Captain Terauchi declined the offer, fearing unintended consequences of a military confrontation with the UFO. About that time, a United Airlines passenger jet flew into the same air zone and was requested by the ATC to get a visual on the situation. Terauchi reported, "When the United plane came by our side, the spaceship disappeared suddenly. The strange encounter ended 150 miles away from Anchorage." 1 week after the JL-1628 incident, John Callahan, the FAA Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations in Washington, D.C., received a call from a flight control supervisor in Anchorage. The Anchorage flight controller told Callahan that the Anchorage FAA office was full of media and asked him what they should do. Callahan asked what happened, and the Anchorage official replied, "It's the UFO." Callahan asked, "What UFO?" The Anchorage official explained that a week earlier, a UFO chased a 747 across Alaska's skies for approximately 30 minutes. Callahan told his Anchorage associate to get the data together and immediately ship it to him in Washington, D.C. Callahan said he wanted everything, including the radar recordings and the recordings between the controller on the ground and Captain Terauchi. Callahan also contacted the military, but the Air Force refused to send their tapes. When Callahan received the tapes, he listened to the 3-way conversation between Anchorage Air Traffic Control, or ATC, Elmendorf Air Force Base's NORAD Regional Operations Control Center, and Captain Terauchi on JAL 1628. He also played the tape of the ATC radar sightings. Callahan noted there was no sign of the UFOs on the ATC radar. However, from listening to the conversation, it was clear those at Elmendorf with their more sophisticated radar saw the UFOs, and were tracking their maneuvers. The military controller noted the UFOs were traveling at thousands of miles per hour as they swirled around the 747. One of the most surprising findings Callahan discovered was near the end of the incident when the United Airlines flight arrived. At that moment, Captain Tarauchi no longer saw the giant UFO, and the United pilot never saw the craft. Military radar, though, clearly showed the UFO, and it had tucked in behind the United flight and began following it. No one at Elmendorf's NORAD Regional Operations Control Center notified the United crew to inform them a giant, unidentified aircraft was following them. Callahan's boss told him not to tell anyone about the UFO incident until they could meet with intelligence and security personnel. The following day, his boss set up a briefing. The meeting included 3 FBI agents, 3 CIA agents, and Ronald Reagan's scientific study team. Callahan and his staff presented everything they had and answered questions. When the meeting concluded, one of the CIA agents swore the participants to secrecy and told them this meeting never happened. The agents admitted the UFOs were not stealth bombers, then in development, or any other military aircraft type. The CIA agents told Callahan they could not release this information to the American public because it would cause a panic. The CIA confiscated all the original voice recordings and radar tapes connected to the UFO incident, but they did not know Callahan had copies of everything at his office. Callahan said he believed Captain Tarauchi saw 3 UFOs, and Reagan's scientific team agreed with him. They said this was the only time a UFO was recorded on radar for such an extended period. Besides reported UFOs, missing cases left unexplained also evoke many conspiracies about an unknown force beyond our understanding. One of the largest ever instances of the disappearance of U.S. military personnel happened not during wartime, but in 1950, when a U.S. Air Force, USAF, Douglas C-54 Skymaster of Strategic Air Command disappeared en route from Anchorage, Alaska to Great Falls, Montana. No trace of the aircraft, its crew, or passengers has ever been found. The C-54 Skymaster was a militarized version of the Douglas DC-4, an unpressurized airliner powered by 4 Wasp piston engines. When America entered World War II, the War Department requisitioned all existing orders for DC-4 airliners and had them modified with additional fuel tanks and designated as the C-54 Skymaster. The C-54D, provided with uprated engines, entered service in 1944, and these aircraft served in all theaters during World War II. They also provided airlift capacity in the Korean War and during the Berlin airlift. By 1950, the Skymaster was beginning to be phased out of USAF service, being replaced by the much larger Douglas C-124 Globemaster II. However, large numbers of C-54s were still in use. On Thursday, January 26th, C-54D 42-72469 of the 1st Strategic Support Squadron, Strategic Air Command was detailed to fly U.S. servicemen from Elmendorf AFB in Anchorage, Alaska, to Great Falls AFB in Montana. The aircraft carried 8 crew members, the pilot and co-pilot, an instructor pilot, navigator, radio operator, and 3 flight engineers. The passengers comprised 34 U.S. servicemen and 2 civilians, Mrs. Joyce Esp and her infant son, Victor. The C-54 attempted to take off during the morning of January 26th, but problems with one of its engines forced it to remain at Elmendorf while repairs were completed. It finally departed at around 1 p.m. local time on what was planned to be an 8-hour flight, crossing some of the most rugged and desolate terrain in North America. The weather was clear but very cold, reaching 25 degrees at ground level in a number of places. For much of its journey, the C-54 used Airway Amber 2, an air route established during World War II and which follows the Alaska Highway. In 1950, the route was provided with a radio station and an emergency strip approximately every 100 miles. As per standard operating procedure, the aircraft was required to make regular radio situation reports en route. At 3:09 p.m. local time, around 2 hours after takeoff, the C-54 made a routine report that it was flying at 10,000 feet over the small town of Snag in Yukon, and that it expected to reach the next radio station at Aishihik in Yukon 30 minutes later. That was the last time that anyone heard from the Skymaster. Despite massive and continuing searches, there remains no clue as to what may have happened to it. When the C-54 failed to arrive in Great Falls, a search operation was launched. Operation Mike. The pilot of the missing aircraft was First Lieutenant Mike Tissick. The search was aided by the fact that large numbers of U.S. aircraft and troops were already in Alaska for Exercise Sweetbriar, a joint U.S.-Canadian military exercise. Up to 85 U.S. and Canadian aircraft took part in the search for the missing C-54, assisted by 7,000 men on the ground. It seemed incredible to believe that an aircraft as large as a C-54 could simply vanish, but that is precisely what happened. At the time, there was no radar coverage in the area in which the aircraft was lost, which might have given a clue as to its fate. Despite what was then one of the largest search operations ever undertaken, no trace was found of the missing aircraft, its crew, or passengers. There were unconfirmed reports of the receipt of faint and garbled radio messages, and the sighting of smoke and people who might have been survivors, but many of these were found to originate with troops taking part in Exercise Sweetbriar, and none were ever proven to be attributable to the missing aircraft. During the search, 3 C-47 aircraft, 2 USAF and 1 Royal Canadian Air Force, crashed, though fortunately all 3 were quickly located and there were no fatalities. The search continued until February 14th, when the USAF abruptly switched focus to look for a missing nuclear bomb. On February 13, 1950, a Convair B-36 Peacemaker carrying a Mark IV Fat Man nuclear weapon suffered fires in 3 of its engines while en route from Alaska to Texas, and was forced to jettison its bomb in the ocean off British Columbia. The 17 crew members on the B-36 bailed out over Canada, and the USAF launched a search for the missing men and the nuclear weapon. The missing bomb was not live. It was a training weapon containing a core of lead rather than radioactive material, but it was still a highly secret device which the USAF urgently wanted to recover. 12 of the crew from the B-36 were subsequently rescued, but the crash site of the B-36 wasn't found until 3 years later during a search for a missing aircraft owned by Texas millionaire oilman Ellis Hall. The body of 1 crew member was found at the B-36 crash site, but the remaining 4 missing men were never located. The jettisoned nuke was also never found, but ongoing searches meant that on February 20th, 1950, the search for the missing C-54 Skymaster was officially ended. The next of kin of both the crew and passengers were informed that all on board were presumed to have died. In the almost 70 years since, no one has found any trace of the missing C-54. How can that be? How can a 100-foot-long military aircraft which weighs over 17 metric tons and 44 people simply vanish without a trace? The terrain over which the C-54 disappeared is certainly rugged and remote, but an aircraft that large should have left a readily identifiable crash site. Some people have suggested that the C-54 may have crashed or attempted a landing on a frozen lake only to drop through the ice. That is certainly possible, but none of the lakes in the region are especially deep, and no one has ever reported floating debris or leaking fuel or oil in any of the likely locations. Another option is that, after passing over Snag for unknown reasons, the C-54 flew off course to the south over the Gulf of Alaska instead of continuing southeast towards Whitehorse. It might then have ditched in the ocean, but no one has been able to explain why, if this was the case, no radio messages were received from the aircraft. At that time, you'd think aliens might have had some part in these strange incidents. Some people believe so. The last frontier state, after all, is not immune from UFO cases. So, was the C-54 overpowered by superior technology, causing the plane to vanish? Or is the C-54 abducted by a UFO? Until an Alaska Triangle survivor comes back to civilization to share their story, the questions remain. That's all the information that we have for you today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. One day, circa 1950, the physicist Enrico Fermi was talking with fellow scientists about flying saucers and whether it might be possible, in theory, for an advanced alien species to cross the vast expanses of the galaxy by traveling faster than the speed of light. Suddenly, Fermi erupted. "But where is everybody?" Thus was born the Fermi paradox. The universe is big and old, and it is highly plausible that alien civilizations have evolved, based purely on statistical probabilities. Fermi posed his question in an era of technological revolutions, including computers and rocketry. It seemed possible humans would master space travel and explore the cosmos. So why is there no compelling scientific evidence that extraterrestrials have visited Earth? Perhaps the simplest explanation for the Fermi paradox is that there's no paradox at all. They're here, among us. The idea that mysterious things seen in the sky are alien spaceships has proved remarkably resilient. It has had some ups and downs and is now in an up phase. We have 3 key witnesses who reported highly publicized encounters with unknown objects in military training airspace. They are Ryan Graves and David Fravor, 2 former U.S. Navy aviators, and David Grush, a decorated U.S. military combat veteran and Pentagon intelligence officer. Not only that, 2024 has barely begun, and already there have been 2 viral news stories featuring tall aliens. The fact that 2 similar stories went viral in the first half of January highlights the increased public interest in aliens and paranormal phenomena, likely ignited by Congress taking the time to hear UFO testimony. All of these make many alien and UFO hunters believe that this year is going to be the year when aliens will finally make contact with mankind. But does it hold true? Or is it just a myth? All this and more will be discussed in today's episode. First, you have to know that as of now, the US has spent nearly a century inquiring into the unknown. But how to keep track of it all? Here's a timeline of the US government's ongoing fascination with UFOs. Over the course of 2 decades, from 1947 to 1969, the U.S. Air Force cataloged 12,618 sightings of UFOs as part of what is now known as Project Blue Book. These include lights, objects, and unexplained radar readings reported by military and civilian pilots, weather observers, astronomers, and other sources. The project came to an end in 1969 after a study by the University of Colorado, led by Edward U. Condon, concluded there was no evidence that UFOs came from other worlds, and that most sightings could be explained by natural phenomena, or even hoaxes. But the Condon report didn't put an end to interest in UFOs. So-called UFO-logists spent the next few decades filing open records requests with federal agencies to uncover what was known about the sightings. In 1995, businessman Robert Bigelow convened a small group in Las Vegas to discuss the possibility of alien life. He called the group the National Institute for Discovery Science. Participants included 2 former astronauts, Ed Mitchell and Harrison Schmitt, and 1 sitting U.S. Senator, Harry Reid, Democrat of Nevada. "A lot of people said it would ruin my career," Reid later said. That didn't quite happen. Reid would eventually become a key figure in driving the U.S. government's investigation of UFOs. In November 2004, 2 Navy pilots on a training mission were ordered to intercept a mysterious craft. They saw and captured on video an unusual oval-shaped craft, about 40 feet long, hovering over the Pacific Ocean about 100 miles off San Diego. It streaked away before the pilots could get near. One of the pilots, CMDR David Fravor, said at the time that he had no idea what he saw. It had no plumes, wings, or rotors and outran our F-18S. In 2007, with backing from Reid, now the U.S. Senate's majority leader, the Pentagon launched the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program to investigate the latest round of sightings. The agency said in briefing papers that what was considered science fiction is now science fact. The program was run by a military intelligence official, Luis Elizondo, and worked hand-in-hand with an aerospace research company run by Bigelow. Next, in a series of incidents during this time, Navy pilots reported and made video recordings of a series of encounters with unidentified craft near Florida and Virginia that could reach high altitudes and hypersonic speeds. One pilot reported a near collision in 2014. Another later told 60 Minutes that the craft were hard to explain. You have rotation, you have high altitudes. You have propulsion, right? I don't know what it is, frankly. These incidents and investigations mostly went unreported to the broader public until December 2017, when the New York Times reported the existence of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Although Pentagon officials said the program had ended in 2012, Elizondo told the paper he continued its work informally with cooperation from the Navy and CIA until his resignation in the fall of 2017. That sparked a new wave of interest in UFOs among the public, the media, and even scientists. In July 2020, Ravi Kopparapu and Jacob Hawk Misra, a NASA scientist and astrobiologist, respectively, wrote in Scientific American that it was time to revisit the conclusions of the Condon Report. They wrote, "Perhaps some, or even most, UAP events are simply classified military aircraft, or strange weather formations, or other misidentified mundane phenomena. However, there are still a number of truly puzzling cases that might be worth investigating." In August 2020, the Pentagon announced the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force to improve its understanding of and gain insight into the nature and origins of the unidentified objects. In April 2021, the Navy confirmed video of unidentified objects buzzing U.S. warships near California. The incident would be added to the list of sightings under investigation. In June, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released its preliminary assessment of UFO sightings from 2004 to 2021. The report suggested that the UFOs, now known as UAPs, could fall into 5 likely categories: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, public and private aerospace developmental programs, foreign adversary systems, and a catch-all other bin. In April 2022, the Pentagon announced the formation of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to investigate objects that might pose a threat to national security. The following June, NASA announced it was setting up an independent study program to cover the issue from a scientific perspective. We will be identifying what data, from civilians, government, nonprofits, companies, exists, what else we should try to collect, and how to best analyze it, said David Spergel, the study team leader. And 2022 also brought another acronym change. Unidentified aerial phenomena are now officially called Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. Whatever is happening up, it still hasn't entirely been explained. The Director of National Intelligence released a follow-up report in June 2023, identifying an additional 510 sightings, of which 171 remained unexplained. In those cases, unidentified craft often appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities, the report said. Most explosively, A former intelligence official named David Grush came forward in June with a whistleblower report alleging the U.S. government was in possession of intact and partially intact vehicles from UFO crash sites. The craft, he said, were of non-human origin. But he also said he had never personally seen the objects, inviting skepticism from outside experts. As Boston University's Joshua Semeter, a professor of electrical and computer engineering and a member of the NASA team examining these reports, said, "In the long history of claims of extraterrestrial visitors, it is this level of specificity that always seems to be missing. The evidence may be wanting, but the questions, and the sightings, and the investigations continue. Now the public's eyes are on two infamous locations where they believe we will have close encounters with extraterrestrials. One is Alaska, another is Area 51. Alaska, as you know, is known for its beautiful, breathtaking, serene, natural life and frigid outskirts. But since the dawn of time, there have been stories of paranormal activity ranging from abnormal lights and UFOs, UAPs, that continue today. Residents have reported otherworldly sightings in every corner from southern Juneau to the edge of the Arctic Circle with intensified frequency. UFO encounters have been historically linked to areas of high military activity, and Alaska has 9 major bases. Most people are familiar with the Bermuda Triangle, which is 500,000 square miles of open water in the Atlantic Ocean, creating a triangle between Miami, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda. Although the Bermuda Triangle is more widely known around the world, there has been evidence of the Alaska Triangle, which is more mysterious and has more cases of vanishings and crashes. The Alaska Triangle is located in a vast, remote wilderness area twice the size of Texas. This area is hundreds of times more deadly and is located between Utqiagvik, Anchorage, and Juneau. In the last 30 years, 16,000 people have disappeared without a trace, which is 2 to 3 times the amount of the Bermuda Triangle. That's why the Alaska Triangle is well known as one of the most mysterious and dangerous places on Earth. Ships have gone missing, planes down, and many people have vanished with no remains found or any good reason. The greatest risk in the Alaska Triangle is in the air, with over 2,000 planes crashed or vanished in the last 20 years. The case that baffles investigators to this day is the disappearance of a military transport plane called the Douglas C-54, known as the Missing Douglas, which vanished in 1950. On January 26, 1950, the Missing Douglas took off from the Elmendorf Air Base in the middle of the Alaska Triangle with 44 passengers on board. There were 36 passengers and 8 crew members carrying cargo, and the C-54 is one of the most important planes in the Air Force. During this time in history, it was a year after NATO was formed and the start of the Cold War. The C-54 was headed east 240 miles to a mandatory point. The plane made the radio call on time, and 2 hours into the flight, it vanished without a trace in the Alaska Triangle. There was no distress call or any indication that there was an emergency. After the plane did not arrive at its destination, it was declared missing, and an enormous search effort went into action, making it a top priority. 7,000 ground troops and 85 aircraft were deployed to help in the search of the enormous area of 300,000 square miles. No one could determine why and how the Missing Douglas disappeared. Thus, the case of the Missing Douglas aircraft remains open and unsolved after 70 years. In October 1972, a plane carrying the leader of the House of Representatives, Boggs, mysteriously vanished on the southern edge of the triangle. With 16,000 people and many planes missing, it remains one of the most mystifying mysteries on the planet. Was it a portal? Wormhole? Is paranormal activity happening in the Alaska Triangle? Was the C-54 abducted by a UFO? Frankly, we can't rule out any of these possibilities despite their wildness. In fact, an organization made up of civilian volunteers studies reported UFO sightings and has made the claims based on old eyewitness reports. According to its members, there may be alien bases off the coast of Alaska. Researchers and enthusiasts believe that the deep water off the coast of the state conceals the sites. It comes after they took a dive into the eyewitness reports from crew members of a ship in 1945. The alleged sightings of an alien craft from almost 80 years ago were never made public at the time. Unusual sightings in the area lead the network's members to believe that UFOs move over water and therefore likely have bases under the water. According to the researchers, the crew members on the U.S. Army transporter ship saw a UFO between 150 and 200 feet emerge from the water while sailing past island Adak. It is claimed that the UFO was unchanged by the wind or sail while it turned in its position. It then allegedly circled the ship a number of times before taking off. However, the reports of the sightings have not been found, and investigators have had to work without them. Enthusiasts believe that UFOs would be used to transport extraterrestrial life to other alien sites hiding in the waters. UFO researcher Johnny Enoch claims that sightings of UFOs rising from the water are due to an underwater network. He added, "Some have said the UFOs are using wormholes as a superhighway to connect their places in the universe." Some ufologists have theorized that other sites on Earth act as bases for alien life, including a mountain in Seoul, South Korea, which is allegedly hiding a UFO, according to Dr. Stephen Greer. In an episode of the series The Alaska Triangle, Enoch showed satellite images from underwater in an attempt to prove his belief in an underwater network. The images reportedly showed one of these alien bases in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California. Meanwhile, another researcher featured in the program showed markings from the seabed that she claimed could have been roadways for aliens. The U.S. Sun previously reported on the 3-hour closure of an airport last weekend following an alleged UFO sighting. India's Air Force scrambled jets in response to a UFO that was seen hovering over Imphal's Bir Tikendrajit International Airport. According to police, the object was visible with bare eyes before it mysteriously vanished. Sadly, no evidence of a UFO was found following its disappearance. Next, let's come into the Area 51, located at Groom Lake in the middle of the barren desert of southern Nevada. Area 51 is a U.S. Air Force installation that has become infamous for a speculated connection with UFOs. Conspiracy theories surrounding the base suggest that it is used for the testing of alien technology recovered from supposed crash sites, like the famous one in Roswell, New Mexico. This has been fueled by the fact that the base was a secret for many years and is still inaccessible to the general public. As a result, this innocuous-looking military installation became forever associated with aliens in 1989, after a man claiming to have worked there, Robert Lazar, gave an interview with a Las Vegas news station. Lazar claimed that Area 51 housed and studied alien spacecraft and that his job was to recreate the technology for military use. However, Lazar's credentials were soon discredited. According to school records, Lazar never went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology or California Institute of Technology, as he claimed. At the time, though, engineers at Area 51 were studying and recreating advanced aircraft. Just aircraft acquired from other countries, not from outer space. Nevertheless, with all of the high-tech flights out of Area 51, including more than 2,150 takeoffs by the A-12, reports of unidentifiable flying objects skyrocketed in the area. As journalist Annie Jacobson wrote in her 2011 book on Area 51, the aircraft's titanium body, moving as fast as a bullet, would reflect the sun's rays in a way that could make anyone think UFO. After all, Area 51 is still a pillar of U.S. alien mythology. A 2019 interview with Lazar on a popular podcast inspired a Storm Area 51 event. in which about 6,000 people showed up in the desert to look for evidence of aliens. It ultimately morphed into a festival celebrating all things alien. Even today, Area 51 draws believers and skeptics who frequent the small but thriving trail of alien-themed museums, restaurants, motels, parades, and festivals, all in hopes of discovering that the truth really is out there. While the search for traces of aliens on Earth is stuck, scientists searching a sea of stars for the sounds or sights of extraterrestrial intelligence. Because space is inconveniently enormous and traversing it so intensely time-consuming, it's exceedingly more likely that humanity's first brush with extraterrestrials will come in the form of eavesdropping on radio transmissions they've sent, or seeing a sign of technological civilization with a telescope, then recovering a pancaked little green wayfarer from a crashed capsule. So that's where scientists are focusing their work, listening and watching the stars above. This endeavor is exhaustive and exhausting, and the multitude of false positives can make it feel Sisyphean. But the prospect of success makes it worthwhile. A confirmed extraterrestrial signal detection would be a moment that divides history into before we knew there was somebody out there and after, says Seth Shostak, a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute. Discovering the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence would also instantaneously teach us something profound about the sustainability of life across the universe. As Ravi Kumar Koparapu, a planetary habitability researcher at NASA, said, "If we detect a civilization, that means civilizations can exist for a reasonable amount of time and overcome their issues and problems. That means there's great hope for us." This is not simply a matter of pointing technological ears and eyes at the night sky and hearing the whispers or music of a distant intelligence. The cosmos is a noisy place, brimming with energetic bursts, including the hubbub from Earth itself, that drown out and occasionally mimic potential alien transmissions. It makes possible signs of extraterrestrial intelligence tricky to spot and harder to confirm. That prompts the question, one day we may get a message from, or see the signs of, intelligent alien life. So, how would we know it's real? Regardless of the answer, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is actually matter. It is something any astronomer or astrophysicist can do if they have access to the right kind of observatories. The best-known place that engages in it is the SETI Institute, a privately funded nonprofit research organization in Silicon Valley. Inaugurated in 1984, its funders and specific functions have shifted over time, but it has always been interested in looking out for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. Other SETI research groups at other institutions and universities around the world share that same elemental goal, and if you ask any of their members to explain their motivations, a common refrain is that the scientific revelations of discovering extraterrestrial would be unparalleled. If they were to discover that there is life out there, intelligent life that has forged a civilization, it would first mean that biology is not a fluke. Instead, it is something that can take root on many worlds, something that does not merely arise but repeatedly produces thinking, technological, curious creatures, those that may wish to share their knowledge of the universe and their way of traversing or surviving it with others. And if this civilization existed on a world very different from Earth, it would demonstrate that the largely unlivable cosmos is populated by myriad different isles of habitability. But SETI research, as told, is grueling work. No matter how scientists do it, it takes time, effort, and heapings of healthy skepticism. Those looking for the tangible gratification of a classic UFO are almost certainly going to be very disappointed. Of course, the US military is hiding things, says David Spergel, an astrophysicist at Princeton. But that doesn't mean it's hiding aliens. The way Spergel sees things, an alien intelligence visiting Earth either wants to be seen, in which case it would be rather flamboyant about it, showing itself to governments and citizens alike, or it doesn't, in which case it will remain inscrutable to everyone, even spies. They would not attach blinking lights to their interplanetary spacecraft, just as Ukraine's drones do not announce their existence to Russian forces with flashing underside lights. To Spergel, the most interesting part of the search for alien intelligence is as philosophical as it is scientific. Channeling the late Carl Sagan, he says the most interesting property of the universe by a wide margin is that somehow it has evolved a capacity to know itself, to ask questions about itself. In other words, elsewhere in vast space, billions of years of unconscious physics and chemistry created biology, and another few billion years have resulted in at least one species like us that wonders aloud how everything came to be, effectively giving the cosmos self-awareness. Wouldn't it be nice to know that we aren't the only ones capable of that? Everyone needs some alone time, but nobody likes to be truly, permanently alone. SETI scientists are simply applying that notion on a species-wide scale. We could potentially join other intelligent species on a quest for self-understanding. They might not know the answers to the big questions, the why are we here category of queries, any more than we do, but we can join them in figuring it out. That's all the information that we have for you today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Covered in impenetrable forests and lined with craggy coastlines, Alaska has achieved almost a mythic status as the last frontier. The land of the midnight sun holds a plethora of enigmatic stories and legends. Over the years, Alaska has seen its fair share of reported UFO sightings over the years. Its vast wilderness, extreme weather conditions, and sparse population have contributed to the mystique surrounding unusual sightings in the state. These sightings often range from mysterious lights and objects to more elaborate encounters with unidentified flying objects. One notable incident in Alaska's UFO history is the Alaska Triangle, which is often compared to the Bermuda Triangle due to its reputation for unexplained disappearances and strange phenomena. Stretching from the southeastern city of Juneau to the northern Barrow Mountain Range and to the western city of Anchorage, this triangular area encompasses some of the most rugged and uninhabited terrain in the United States. The mystery of the Alaska Triangle is fueled by a series of unexplained events that have occurred over many decades. Countless individuals, including hikers, tourists, pilots, and even experienced outdoorsmen, have vanished without a trace while traversing the region. Aircraft have disappeared mid-flight, leaving no wreckage or evidence behind. Ships have gone missing in the waters surrounding the triangle, their crews never to be seen again. These inexplicable disappearances have left investigators baffled and spawned numerous theories ranging from natural phenomena to extraterrestrial activity. One of the most mysterious cases that baffles investigators to this day is the disappearance of a military transport plane called the Douglas C-54, known as the Missing Douglas, which vanished in 1950. On January 26, 1950, the Missing Douglas took off from the Elmendorf Air Base in the middle of the Alaska Triangle with 44 passengers on board. There were 36 passengers and 8 crew members also carrying cargo, and the C-54 is one of the most important planes in the Air Force. During this time in history, it was a year after NATO was formed and the start of the Cold War. The C-54 was headed east, 240 miles to a mandatory point. The plane made the radio call on time, and 2 hours into the flight, it vanished without a trace in the Alaska Triangle. There was no distress call or any indication that there was an emergency. The military base was 56 miles from the Soviet Union, and the USA initially thought they may have shot down the plane. However, The C-54 was traveling away from that region when it disappeared. After the plane did not arrive at its destination, it was declared missing, and an enormous search effort went into action, making it a top priority. 7,000 ground troops and 85 aircraft were deployed to help in the search of the enormous area of 300,000 square miles. No one could determine why and how the missing Douglas disappeared. After the Douglas C-54 incident, 4 planes crashed mysteriously in the Alaska Triangle. The first plane crashed in the southern end of the triangle and they were rescued. The second aircraft was a C-47 which crashed in the southern part of the search grid. There were no fatalities. A week later, a third search plane went down near the last position the Douglas was last seen. The fourth plane is very significant because it wasn't a search plane. It was a B-36 nuclear bomber, twice as big as the Douglas. The B-36 took off from the Eielson Air Force Base and headed to Fort Worth, Texas, non-stop on an exercise. The plane went over the Pacific before turning back into the triangle towards Juneau. The craft lost all power, the atomic bomb was cast into the ocean, and the plane crashed in Mount Cologit in British Columbia. The nuclear weapon and several thousand pounds of conventional explosives all vanished. The bomb was never found, becoming the first loss of a nuclear bomb in history. 4 airplanes were lost in a 30-day period in the Alaska Triangle. Hostile Soviet Union activity was ruled out. Was it magnetic interference? Electromagnetic forces and gravitational anomaly? Was the C-54 overpowered by superior technology, causing the plane to vanish? In October 1972, a plane carrying the leader of the House of Representatives Boggs mysteriously vanished on the southern edge of the triangle. This government disappearance triggered the largest search and rescue operation up to that point in U.S. history. Still, 40 military aircraft and more than 39 search days yielded no sign of wreckage or survivors. No scrap metal, no frozen boots, nothing. Up to now, an astonishing number of people, estimated at 20,000 since the 1970s, have vanished in this vast swath of land. Considering how sparsely populated the area is, that's a shockingly high rate. For the whole of Alaska, it works out to be an average of 2,250 people disappearing every year, twice the national average, many of which appear to occur in this triangle of ultra-rugged land. So, what exactly happened? We just don't know. It remains one of the most mystifying mysteries on the planet. Was it a portal? A wormhole? Is paranormal activity happening in the Alaska Triangle? Was the C-54 abducted by a UFO? The case of the missing Douglas aircraft remains open and unsolved after 70 years. In short, no crash evidence has ever been found. The mysterious circumstances surrounding people and planes missing fueled conspiracy theories. You'd think aliens might have had some part in these strange incidents. Some people believe so. The last frontier state is not immune from UFO cases. November 17th of this year will mark the 38th anniversary of one of the best documented UFO cases ever, and it happened in the skies above Alaska. 3 UFOs played tag with Japan Airlines cargo flight 1628 for 50 minutes while they were visually observed by a sometimes terrified flight crew. During the last 30 minutes, the UFOs were tracked on military and civilian radar, and the entire encounter was verified by a high-level administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA for short. In the own words of John Callahan, who was the division chief of the Accidents, Evaluations, and Investigations Division of the FAA in Washington from 1981 to 1988. I was involved with an investigation of an extraordinary event, but was asked not to talk about it. Since retiring, I decided that the public had a right to this information and that they could handle it. On November 7, 1986, a Japanese 747 cargo jet with a pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer were flying from Iceland to Anchorage just after 5 p.m. when they all saw a gigantic round object, much larger than their cargo jet, with colored lights flashing around it. Captain Kenju Terauchi, a pilot for 29 years, also saw two smaller objects, but described the largest spaceship, as he called it, to be at least the size of an aircraft carrier because he had it on his radar, which provided range marks. The object proceeded to fly level with the 747 until it suddenly approached very close. Following the directives of the FAA, Terauchi dropped his jet 4,000 feet and even made a 360-degree turn to avoid the objects, but they continued to follow, even appearing in front of his cockpit. Over the next half hour, the UFO could appear 8 miles in front of him, and in one radar sweep 10 seconds later, it could be 7 miles behind him. Captain Terauchi said the technology was unthinkable because the UFOs appeared to have control over both inertia and gravity. The largest object was captured on 3 separate radars, between the FAA, Air Force, and in the radar screen in the cockpit of JAL Flight 1628. Captain Terauchi said all 3 objects followed his jet for 400 miles, and the FAA flight control reports confirm that the object followed JAL Flight 1628 for at least 32 minutes. At one point, the object was seen on radar to be as close as 5 miles to the jet. In the following days and months, the entire crew was interviewed by FAA officials extensively, each of them providing independent descriptions and drawings of the spaceships and their extraordinary behavior. FAA investigators found the crew, whose experience totals more than 46 years, to be normal, professional, rational, and had no drug or alcohol involvement. John Callahan, who was involved in the investigation of this incident, was called to FAA headquarters to provide a briefing to scientists of President Reagan and CIA officials. In Callahan's words, after reviewing the information, including radar trackings, a CIA official told him, "This event never happened. We were never here. We're confiscating all this data, and you are all sworn to secrecy." And like any sane person would, Callahan asked what the CIA officers thought it was, and he was told it was a UFO, and emphasized that if they came out and told the American public that they ran into a UFO out there, it would cause panic across the country. That's why they kept it under wraps. The CIA then confiscated all the original voice recordings and radar tapes connected to the UFO incident, but they did not know Callahan had copies of everything at his office. Callahan strongly believed Captain Terauchi saw 3 UFOs, and that was the only time a UFO was recorded on radar for such an extended period. Commercial airline pilots again reported UFO sightings in Alaska's skies in January 1987, little more than 2 months after Captain Terauchi claimed he and his crew saw 3 UFOs. On January 29, 1987, the crew of Alaska Airlines Flight 53 sighted a fast-moving object on their onboard weather radar. The plane was flying at 35,000 feet and was approximately 60 miles west of McGrath on a flight from Nome to Anchorage. The crew calculated the UFO was moving at a speed of 18,000 miles per hour as it sped away from them. In short, over the years, individuals have reported countless other UFOs in the skies over Alaska. Eyewitnesses recounted mysterious UFO sightings in the area, describing triangular objects that defied conventional aviation norms. Reports from experienced rescue workers investigating missing persons cases revealed encounters with phantom voices, confusion, and dizziness, attributed to an unknown feature of the Alaskan wilderness. On the other hand, note that as the most sparsely populated state, just 730,000 people live in Alaska, meaning just 1/20% of the state is inhabited. The rest is relatively untouched wilderness, complete with ragged mountain ranges, glaciers, bitterly cold weather, millions of lakes, countless crevasses, vast valleys, and lots of bears. UFO expert Debbie Ziegelmeyer suggested that the sparsely populated nature of Alaska makes it attractive to aliens. Paranormal investigator Johnny Enoch speculated on secret military involvement. "What's a bold idea, but we can rule it out?" Either way, note that not only the CIA and FAA, but also NASA are lying about UFO. There's good reason to suspect NASA of being a part of the anti-transparency movement concerning UFOs. NASA itself is part of the cover-up. First off, we have testimony from former NASA contractors like Donna Hare, who claimed NASA had been airbrushing out UFOs in photos they released to the public. These photos could have been enlightening to us all and helped us better understand the phenomenon. Carl Wolf, a military analyst, likewise claimed NASA and other organizations were covering up evidence of structures on the moon. NASA personnel were in the room as they were investigating the evidence for man-made or otherworldly structures on the moon. Now, could both these witnesses be lying? Possibly. But let's get to our next witness that will provide further evidence damning NASA. Gary McKinnon was an IT guy inspired by Donna Hare's testimony. He was concerned about the transparency efforts of the organization and what they had possibly been hiding. He was often concerned about the issues faced by poor pensioners who couldn't afford heating. If there were groundbreaking energy technologies locked away, then for him, this was a crime against humanity. Why hide technology that could solve the world's energy issues and solve our issues with climate change? He is often called a hacker, but this is not quite right. He logged into an unprotected network by chance and was able to access NASA servers. He faced jail time and extradition for these serious charges. But those keeping this a secret have also done a serious wrong. On the server, McKinnon found photos in a proprietary format of a cylindrical-shaped object with domes on it. It had no rivets nor any other evidence for normal manufacturing methods. He also found a list of non-terrestrial officers and the names of various spaceships under the designation USS United States Spaceship. This might be alien, or it might be further evidence for the existence of a secret space program called Solar Warden created by our government. While Gary did a wrong and accessed unauthorized computers, so did the secret keepers who are hiding this from humanity. There are many reports of military abductions that, if true, definitely are unconstitutional and violate the unreasonable search and seizure clause of the Fourth Amendment. NASA's hiding potential evidence for this, and any alien activity or secret space program, is harmful to humanity and to all of us. Thankfully, Gary was never extradited, but the harm was done, his career was ruined, and his life was in tatters. Thankfully, he seems to be doing better now. However, NASA and other organizations were never held to account for what happened. Put simply, there is reasonable evidence for non-human or secret space program activity on the moon that is being covered up. Weird transmissions and sounds have been heard on the moon, as well as strange lights on the moon that seem to disappear and have no explanation. If this is true, then there is seriously something strange on the moon. What natural lights just happened to turn off? While this could be natural, repetitive blinking lights in the same place could indicate a permanent structure. Historian Richard Dolan even investigated this possibility and found evidence that it is true. Could Gary McKinnon be right, and there is a secret space program with structures on the moon built either by humans or someone else? Well, to be honest, we're not saying every scientist at NASA is part of the cover-up. Some probably have no idea. But the NASA administrator and other executives there have at least some idea. The continuing lack of transparency about UFOs in the US is causing concern not only about the existence of aliens, but about the psychological fallout of uncovering a conspiracy. What if we've been lied to about UFOs? If you thought that we were about to finally get the truth about UFOs, think again. At the end of last year, a U.S. government bill that would have mandated the controlled release of all classified documents and artifacts relating to UFOs was significantly watered down at the last minute so that it would get through Congress. Interest in UAPs, the new term for UFOs, reignited in June 2023 when ex-U.S. intelligence agency whistleblower David Grush told the Debrief website that during his official duties, he had discovered the U.S. had indeed been retrieving spacecraft of non-human origin for decades. The claims led to a congressional hearing, in which Grush and others described what they had gleaned of this super-secret project, or seen with their own eyes during military service. Their testimonies resulted in the new Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Disclosure Act, authored by a bipartisan group of 5 elected representatives, led by Democrat Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Mike Rounds. While it is easy to focus on the extraordinary nature of the subject or the credibility of those witnessing UAPs, the prospect of alien spacecraft raises serious issues that go beyond whether we're alone in the universe. Lots of scientific work is underway, not only to look for signs of extraterrestrial life, but more recently to ask what it would mean psychologically for us if aliens really do exist, and, potentially worse, if the authorities have been lying to us about what they know. When it comes to governments, the primary issue is trust. As Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin explained in his opening remarks on 26 July, the lack of government transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in the very institutions that are meant to serve and protect them. The original text of the UAP Disclosure Act was similar in that it proposed the creation of a national archive, overseen by an independent panel of 9 U.S. citizens. Their job was to decide, free of military, political, or corporate influence, when and how to disclose information from the archive. The act would have empowered the panel to hold more hearings, with witnesses afforded immunity from prosecution. It also proposed that the federal government shall exercise eminent domain over any and all recovered technologies of unknown origin and biological evidence of non-human intelligence that may be controlled by private persons or entities in the interest of the public good. In other words, the U.S. government could commandeer any supposed artifacts held by private citizens or companies and was then under a duty to disclose them to the public. In parallel, the act also called for the Secretary of State to contact any foreign government that may hold material relevant to unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin, or non-human intelligence, and seek disclosure of such material. In short, it would finally have revealed the facts about UAPs. But most of these stipulations have now been struck out. All that remains is the archive, but it will not be administered by an independent body. Following the vote, Schumer described the archive as a major win for government transparency, but then went on to say that it was an outrage that the proposed review board was not adopted. Now it means that declassification of UAP records will be largely up to the same entities that have blocked and obfuscated their disclosure for decades. Speaking to News Nation on 12th of December, Grush was unequivocal, calling the changes the greatest legislative failure in American history. Not only has the act done little to improve transparency, it is already driving the suspicion that the U.S. government really does have something to hide. As clinical psychologist Daniel Stubbings of Cardiff Metropolitan University says, if it is the case that there is no substance to the UFO-UAP issue beyond misperceptions, paranoia, delusions, hallucinations, gullibility, and disinformation, then the government, military, and academic organizations need to openly and transparently look under every alleged rock in this topic. But they have chosen to do the exact opposite, which increases the suspicion that there is something to hide. After all, people have been seeing unexplainable things in the sky for millennia. While it is easy to dismiss them as hallucinations or flights of fancy, it is much harder to ignore photographs and videos from reputable sources. This is exactly what the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in the U.S. released in 2021. Its report, Preliminary Assessment, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, detailed that the U.S. Department of Defense's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force was investigating 144 UAP reports made between 2004 and 2021, mostly by military personnel. It also released 3 declassified videos of some of these UAPs in action. It was such material that helped persuade Stubbings to take the subject seriously. He interviewed people who believed they had seen something they could not explain, interested in identifying any underlying mental health needs or common personality types among them. He found that all kinds of personality profiles, CUAPs, and many are left with unmet psychological needs. As Stubbings explains, initially I felt confident that the UAP issue could be explained by prosaic psychological and/or situational factors. But the more I looked into real cases, the less sure I became. I started realizing this is a very credible topic. If true, it's a game changer. If it's not true, it's deeply concerning. How did we get to this point in society where we are thinking all this stuff is true and we're spending all this money looking into it? Traditionally, it is astronomers who look for evidence of other life in the universe. For example, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, uses telescopes to look for signals that could be coming from alien civilizations. While SETI was once on the fringes of astronomical science, it is now increasingly seen as mainstream. Breakthrough. LISTEN is the largest ever scientific research program searching for evidence of civilizations beyond Earth. It aims to survey the 1M closest stars to Earth and 100 closest galaxies to our own. Running since January 2016 at the University of California, Berkeley, the project announced a new headquarters in Oxford last October. And according to Steve Croft, an astronomer at UC Berkeley and the SETI Institute, and also a senior researcher at the new HQ, for the project it's a big vote of confidence from one of the premier university's astrophysics groups and physics departments in the world. In early December, Croft and colleagues published results from the project from more than 140 terabytes of data, the equivalent of watching more than 5 years of continuous high-definition video from 97 nearby galaxies. Although they found nothing that looked artificial in this particular run, Croft says, it's a start. Other astronomers using different techniques have seen things that warrant further investigation. Beatriz Villarroel, assistant professor of physics at Stockholm University, is leading a team of astronomers looking at photographic plates of the night sky that date from before the first artificial satellite was launched in 1957. As satellites orbit the Earth, they can reflect sunlight, causing bright glints to appear in the night sky. These leave streaks on astronomical images or spots of light that appear and disappear seemingly at random. Mysteriously, on one plate from April 1950, Villarroel found 9 sources of light that appeared within a half-hour period and then vanished. Conducting observations using the Gran Telescopio Canarias on La Palma in the Canary Islands revealed nothing at the locations of the light sources that might have flared up. In other words, there is no astronomical explanation for this type of event. More recently, her team found 3 bright stars on a plate dated 19th of July 1952 that have since vanished. Provocatively, this is a date burned into the diaries of UFO enthusiasts around the world because it coincides with a famous incident in which pilots and radar operators saw lights they couldn't explain in the skies above Washington, D.C. I think it's very important to do this kind of nearby searching for extraterrestrial objects because the astronomical community mostly looks for things very, very far away. I think it's time to do something new, says Villarroel, who is now working to establish the ExoProbe project to look for anomalous objects among the vast number of human satellites currently in orbit. But what happens if she, or anyone else, uncovers irrefutable proof that non-human intelligences have visited or are visiting Earth? A few years ago, physicist John Priestland, who runs an engineering consultancy, found himself wondering what this would mean to us as individuals. According to Priestland, if there is something here to be disclosed, there are a lot of people who will be affected, and there isn't an entity out there, as far as wondering can see, that is putting people first. So he set up Unhidden, a charity dedicated to decreasing the stigma associated with discussing UAPs, non-human intelligences, and the possibility that evidence is being covered up by governments. It's a mission that Stubbings agrees with. But Priestland also notes that there is still a stigma around this topic. People are so frightened about discussing it. But it only takes one account to be real, and it changes the narrative of humanity forever. This is why the Disclosure Act was seen as important, and its altered version is such a disappointment, even potentially dangerous. As Priestland says, these days it's all about my truth, except for people who happen to see strange things in the sky. We don't legitimize their truth. That's why they need help and support. And we need to do that in the context of possible disclosure, because there might suddenly be 8 billion people who have to get used to the fact that they're being told that there's a very different worldview by exactly the organizations that they now realize have lied to them for the past 80 years. As a piece of good news, NASA said Thursday that the study of UFOs will require new scientific techniques, including advanced satellites, as well as a shift in how unidentified flying objects are perceived. The space agency released the findings after a year-long study into UFOs. In its 33-page report, an independent team commissioned by NASA cautioned that the negative perception surrounding UFOs poses an obstacle to collecting data. But officials said NASA's involvement should help reduce the stigma around what it calls UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. As NASA Administrator Bill Nelson stated, we want to shift the conversation about UAPs from sensationalism to science. The agency promised an open and transparent approach. That's all the information that we have for you today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Alaska, the largest and most sparsely populated state in the United States, is a land of vast wilderness, towering mountains, and icy expanses. But beyond its breathtaking landscapes lies a realm of mystery and intrigue, earning it a reputation as a hotbed of enigma and legend. No description of strange happenings in the heart of the last frontier would be complete without reports of an anomaly structure emitting unexplained energy buried deep underground in the Alaskan wilderness, somewhere between Nome and Mount McKinley. And according to many sources, the U.S. government then sealed off the area and silenced all those involved. However, despite facing the risk of being court-martialed for treason, veteran intelligence officer Douglas Muckler bravely spoke out, unveiling the existence of a colossal pyramid constructed entirely of black granite in the heart of Alaska that was not shown on any map or satellite imagery. What secrets are kept within this mysterious structure? Join us as we dig deep into the massive pyramid from the corners of Alaska that has got the U.S. government panicking. Alaska's history is riddled with unsolved mysteries, adding to its reputation as a hub of intrigue. So, whether it's the allure of the unknown, the thrill of discovery, or the fear of the unexplained, Alaska becomes a hotbed of mystery, beckoning those brave enough to venture into its enigmatic depths. As a result, every year in Denali National Park and Preserve, formerly known as Mount McKinley National Park, a national park and preserve located in interior Alaska, the National Park Service, or NPS, responds to hundreds of cases just like this. A hiker gets lost, is quickly reported, and is found within 24 hours. Case closed. But very rarely, the search comes up empty-handed. A backpacker in Sequoia Kings Canyon takes a detour and never returns. A tourist mysteriously walks away from his car and disappears into the Yosemite wilderness. Despite helicopters, scent dogs, and search teams, sometimes people seem to simply vanish. That's when the Investigative Services Branch, ISB, or FBI of the National Park Service, steps in. The special agents of the ISB investigate cold cases, the missing persons and unsolved crimes that slip through the cracks of normal NPS law enforcement. Though it sounds romantic, or like a bad TV show, detectives in flat hats dusting for fingerprints around Old Faithful, it's not an easy job. The abundant wildlife and bad weather of many national parks wreaks havoc on physical evidence. Even after a long search, all the ISB may have to go on is a few fragments of a torn tent, some hiker's hazy eyewitness report, or in one of their recent cases, the story of one man's search for a giant alien pyramid buried deep in the Alaskan wilderness. On May 27, 2020, 41-year-old Nathan Campbell hired a charter plane out of Talkeetna to fly him to a small lake in the northwest corner of Denali National Park. Along with some basic camping gear, Campbell brought a hefty cache of food, stored in plastic tubs, and a two-way satellite communicator to check in with his wife and kids. He planned to spend the next 4 months alone, smack dab in the center of interior Alaska. But Campbell wasn't there for fun. He was on a mission. On the long flight from Talkeetna to Carey Lake, while the vast green carpet of the boreal forest floated beneath them, the usually shy Campbell told his pilot Jason Sturgis how he planned to spend his summer. Campbell had come to Carey Lake to search for something that, until now, only existed in the darkest, least updated corners of the internet. The Black Pyramid, a massive underground structure rumored to be 4 times the size of the famous Cheops in Egypt and thousands, if not millions of years old. Conspiracy theorists claim the structure is so powerful, its importance to national security so tantamount, that all traces of the pyramid and the military base believed to protect it have been wiped from satellite imagery. Although bush pilots, trappers, and natives had traveled the area around Carey Lake for generations, a quick search through the Fairbanks Daily News minor archives shows few references to a giant alien pyramid or top-secret base in central Alaska. But then again, until Nathan Campbell showed up, no one had been really looking for it, and his reasons for starting his search deep in the Alaskan wilderness, if you follow the nebulous logic of conspiracy theory, make perfect sense. First, the Black Pyramid fits neatly into the pantheon of paranoid-inducing military installations in Alaska. The most infamous of these is the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, or HAARP, located just outside of Fairbanks. Depending on who you ask, HAARP is a high-frequency transmitter used to remotely set off earthquakes, to topple Venezuelan dictators, control the world's climate and undermine the fossil fuel industry, or help scientists study the ionosphere. Second, the supposed location of the Black Pyramid has long been recognized as an area of geostrategic importance. In the 1930s, General Billy Mitchell, the so-called father of the U.S. Air Force, saw that Lake Minchumina, about 40 miles north of where Campbell landed at Carey Lake, was equidistant to the major urban industrial centers of the Northern Hemisphere. That meant, with the same tank of fuel, a B-52 taking off from the shores of Lake Minchumina could strike Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, Paris, or even New York. In modern warfare, General Mitchell had shown that the middle of nowhere could become the center of everything. Then, in the early 90s, came the real evidence for the Black Pyramid. Scientists studying shock waves from a 1992 Chinese underground nuclear test recorded a grainy, pyramid-shaped spot of interference 700 below the surface of interior Alaska. But its age, origin, and function are still unknown. The existence of the Black Pyramid was not confirmed until July 26, 2012, when veteran journalist and UFO specialist Linda Moulton Howe reported its discovery on the Coast to Coast AM radio show, despite claims of its ancient origins. Linda Moulton Howe conducted a study in which she reported that the Alaska Triangle is a zone where ships, planes, and people have disappeared. She estimated that 18,000 individuals had gone missing in that area since 1988. On the evening of that day, Linda Moulton Howe aired a pre-recorded conversation with Doug Muchler, a retired U.S. Army counterintelligence agent, who described the events leading to the uncovering of the pyramid and revealed the connection between the location and the U.S. military. Mutchler was transferred from Alaska to Fort Meade, home of the National Security Agency, where he confirmed the pyramid story using classified information. He stated, "I searched for information on archaeological sites or underground facilities in Alaska, but I didn't mention pyramids specifically. I was told that any information about it could be in X, Y, or Z containers," he said. "So I went over there and looked around. I didn't find anything about pyramids, but I did come across some information about Alaska from 2 different vaults. I had just sat down when 2 people approached me and said, 'You don't need to know this stuff.'" Mutchler asserts that a local NBC affiliate aired a report about the discovery of the building about 6 months after the explosion, but when he attempted to reach out to the station for a copy of the report, they denied it had been broadcasted and stated that they did not have a copy to provide. However, things took an unexpected turn the day after Linda Moulton Howe's interview with Mutchler. The son of a former Western Electric engineer contacted her to confirm Mutchler's claims and provide additional information. The new source informed Howe that between 1959 and 1961, his father had worked on a powerful electrical system emanating from a massive underground pyramid of unknown origin in Alaska. According to the new witnesses' accounts, after the war, his father studied electrical engineering and physics in college. He was then selected by the military to be part of a team of experts to study and work in an underground structure in Alaska called the Black Pyramid, as he described it. He repeatedly emphasized how highly the government valued this project and the measures they took to keep it concealed. He had thought it was a military base, but it was actually a research project focused on energy distribution. He went on to become a primary information provider for AT&T, which was a precursor to today's web and cell phone technologies. In his later years, he would often complain about his electricity bill, saying it could be free if people only knew the truth. That means he knew much more than we thought, but sadly, we'll never know it. As he mentioned, it was all confidential information. There may not be any available records. If the pyramid discovered in 1992 is true, the government may have known about it well before then and taken great efforts to keep it hidden. Linda Moulton Howe states that an ancient pyramid can be found approximately 80 kilometers southwest of Mount McKinley. It is believed to have been constructed by a highly advanced civilization that is currently unknown to us. Secret bases, government cover-ups, global warfare, ancient aliens, and pyramid power, everything came together to create the story of the Black Pyramid. The story that Campbell, if he followed any of the internet lore, surely planned his summer vacation around. Sadly, somewhere out there, he got himself into trouble. On October 1st, 2020, Campbell was declared missing. Wherever he is, hopefully he found what he was looking for. Somewhere, deep in the Alaskan wilderness, the search for the Black Pyramid continues on. Notably, similar to Black Pyramid, the Alaska Triangle has sparked a lot of speculation and conspiracy theories. First named in 1972, the Alaska Triangle stretches from Anchorage in south-central Alaska to Juneau in the southeast panhandle to Utqiagvik on Alaska's northern coast. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have vanished from this area, and every year, approximately 4 people go missing per every 1,000 Alaska residents. This rate is twice the national average. Dramatically, many disappearances and other mysteries in Alaska have never been solved. Planes vanish, boats disappear, UFO sightings baffle military officers, and in one instance, the population of an entire village fled their homes to escape a giant, hairy, man-like creature. Here are a few of the stories. 1. The mysterious disappearance of the plane carrying House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and Alaska Representative Nick Begich. In 1972, Hale Boggs agreed to help Nick Begich campaign for Begich's re-election to the House of Representatives. On the morning of October 16, 1972, Boggs, Begich's special assistant Russell Brown, and pilot Don Jones departed Anchorage in a Cessna C-310 aircraft for an estimated 3-hour, 30-minute flight to Juneau and a planned election rally. The weather forecast en route was marginal with turbulence, low visibility, and icing conditions. Johns was an experienced pilot but had a reputation as a risk-taker. Johns called the tower 10 minutes after takeoff, but neither he nor his passengers were ever heard from again. An hour after the Cessna C-310 failed to land in Juneau, an intensive search ensued and lasted 39 days. 400 aircraft searched for any sign of the downed plane, but nothing was found then nor since. Conspiracy theories swirled around the apparent deaths of Boggs and Begich. The most prominent of these suggested J. Edgar Hoover had a bomb placed on the plane to silence Boggs, whom some suspected wanted to reopen the Kennedy assassination investigation. For proponents of the Alaska Triangle theory, this is the most famous case to support their beliefs. Alaska has some of the most intimidating terrain and geography on the planet. Huge mountains covered by glaciers pockmarked with deep crevasses and canyons descend into heavily forested slopes, and these, in turn, plunge into the North Pacific Ocean. Couple this daunting landscape with challenging weather conditions, and you can understand how and why small planes disappear in the 49th state. Planes started vanishing in Alaska as soon as humans began to fly them here. Sometimes, hikers find wreckage from a downed plane decades after it disappeared, or a fisherman spots a seat cushion washed onto the shore, hinting to the final resting spot of the aircraft. Other times, though, as in the case of the Boggs-Begich flight, searchers never find a scrap of material or metal, and the fate of the plane and its occupants remains a mystery. 2. Douglas, C-54. Skymaster vanishes into thin air. At 11:15 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time on January 26, 1950, a Douglas C-54D Skymaster, the military version of the Douglas DC-4, departed Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, headed for Great Falls, Montana. The plane held 36 passengers and 8 crewmen. The passengers included 2 military dependents, the pregnant wife of an Air Force Master Sergeant, and her young son, but the rest of the passengers were military personnel. The flight from Anchorage to Great Falls was scheduled to take 8.5 hours. The pilot expected good weather with clear skies for most of the journey. The excellent visibility afforded the passengers a view of some of the most ruggedly beautiful scenery on the planet. The pilots reported their position to the various communication stations as they passed over them. After 2 hours, the Skymaster passed over the Alaska border and into the Yukon Territory of Canada. When the plane crossed over the Snag radio range located near Beaver Creek, Yukon Territory, the pilot called the station and estimated the aircraft would reach the next reporting point at Aishihik in 20 minutes. His call sounded routine. He did not mention any problems with the plane, and the weather remained favorable. The Aishihik station heard no call from the C-54, and no other transmissions from the aircraft were received. When the C-54 failed to arrive in Great Falls, Montana, officials listed it as missing. An intensive search involving the U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, Canadian military, and civilian aircraft failed to find any clues about what happened to the Douglas C-54D Skymaster. A Canadian forest ranger reported seeing a low-flying plane on January 26th, traveling about 40 miles southwest of Snag. He said the airplane suddenly disappeared, and he heard a loud explosion followed by columns of black smoke. Searchers found this sighting credible, but they found no evidence of a downed airplane in the area the ranger indicated. Other reported sightings of the C-54 sent investigators in several different directions, but they found no remnant of the missing plane. Experts believe whatever happened to the Skymaster was both sudden and catastrophic. and structural failure, navigational error, or crew incapacitation must have caused the accident. Those who believe in the Alaska Triangle might suggest other reasons. 3. Alan Foster, September 9, 2013. This is one of the most recent tragic airplane disappearances in Alaska. Alan Foster, a professional charter pilot with more than 9,000 hours of flight time, was flying his recently purchased PA-32-360 airplane from Atlanta to Anchorage. He was only 360 miles from home when he landed in Yakutat, Alaska, to refuel. After he departed Yakutat, he called the Juneau Flight Service for a weather update, telling them he would stay in Cordova if it wasn't good enough to make it to Anchorage. 18 minutes later, radar showed a transponder target confirmed as Foster's plane at 100 feet. The aircraft was never seen again, and despite an extensive search, no one has ever cited any sign of Foster or his plane. One of the problems searchers encountered was Foster failed to register an ELT beacon for his aircraft. Perhaps this was something he planned to do when he returned home to Anchorage. But no description of strange happenings in the Alaska Triangle would be complete without reports of UFO sightings, and one of the best documented UFO encounters ever recorded occurred in the airspace near Fairbanks on November 17, 1986. This sighting was significant because of who saw it and what they saw, and because military radar recorded the event. Japan Airlines Flight, or JL Flight 1628, was en route from Paris to Tokyo with a cargo of Beaujolais wine. The flight was scheduled to refuel in Reykjavik and in Anchorage. At 5:09 p.m. on November 17, 1986, JAL 1628, under the control of Captain Kenju Terauchi, was about 104 miles northeast of Fort Yukon. The flight controller asked the pilot to adjust his heading to fly south of Fort Yukon and Fairbanks. The co-pilot complied and turned the plane left about 15 degrees. Meanwhile, Captain Terauchi, seated on the cockpit's left side, saw bright lights shining through his window. The lights were to the left and below JAL 1628, and Terauchi assumed they were military planes. The captain ignored the lights until he realized they were keeping pace with his aircraft. Terauchi quickly contacted the Anchorage Center and asked if any other aircraft, either civilian or military, were in the vicinity of his plane. The Anchorage Center flight controller said there were no military aircraft in the area, and ground radar did not show any air traffic other than Flight 1628. At that moment, the lights began moving erratically. They suddenly appeared directly in front of the JAL plane, and Terauchi said the inside of the cockpit shined brightly, and he felt the warmth of the UFO's thrusters on his face. Terauchi said he and his crew were not immediately frightened, but instead watched in amazement as the lights pulsed and kept pace with the jumbo jet. When Terauchi reported the strange lights, the Anchorage Center controller said he saw nothing on his radar. The plane's radar, though, showed a large, green, round object 7 to 8 miles away. When the cargo plane arrived above Eielson Air Force Base near Fairbanks, it was a clear night, and the bright city lights lit up the sky. Terauchi looked out his window and saw the silhouette of a gigantic spaceship following their plane. He later said the UFO was twice the size of an aircraft carrier. He could only guess this was the mothership of the smaller UFOs the plane had previously encountered. The massive, unidentified aircraft struck fear in Terauchi, and he attempted evasive maneuvers to avoid it. The UFO mirrored his every move. The Anchorage Center controller offered to scramble a military jet, but Terauchi declined, fearing the enormous spaceship would consider such an action confrontational. When a United Airlines passenger jet flew into the area near the JL cargo plane, the air traffic controller asked the United flight crew to get a visual of the situation. Terauchi said that as soon as the United Airlines plane arrived, the UFO disappeared, and he did not see it again. 1 week after the JAL 1628 incident, John Callahan, the FAA Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations in Washington, D.C., received a call from a flight control supervisor in Anchorage. The Anchorage flight controller told Callahan that the Anchorage FAA office was full of media and asked him what they should do. Callahan asked what happened, and the Anchorage official replied, "It's the UFO." Callahan asked, "What UFO?" The Anchorage official explained that a week earlier, a UFO chased a 747 across Alaska's skies for approximately 30 minutes. Callahan told his Anchorage associate to get the data together and immediately ship it to him in Washington, D.C. Callahan said he wanted everything, including the radar recordings and the recordings between the controller on the ground and Captain Terauchi. Callahan also contacted the military, but the Air Force refused to send their tapes. When Callahan received the tapes, he listened to the three-way conversation between Anchorage Air Traffic Control, or ATC, Elmendorf Air Force Base's NORAD Regional Operations Control Center, and Captain Terauchi on JAL 1628. He also played the tape of the ATC radar sightings. Callahan noted there was no sign of the UFOs on the ATC radar. Still, from listening to the conversation, it was clear those at Elmendorf with their more sophisticated radar saw the UFOs and were tracking their maneuvers. The military controller noted the UFOs were traveling at thousands of miles per hour as they swirled around the 747. One of the most surprising findings Callahan discovered was near the end of the incident when the United Airlines flight arrived. At that moment, Captain Terauchi no longer saw the giant UFO, and the United pilot never saw the craft. Military radar, though, clearly showed the UFO, and it had tucked in behind the United flight and began following it. No one at Elmendorf's NORAD Regional Operations Control Center notified the United crew to inform them a giant, unidentified aircraft was following them. Callahan's boss told him not to tell anyone about the UFO incident until they could meet with intelligence and security personnel. The following day, his boss set up a briefing. The meeting included 3 FBI agents, 3 CIA agents, and Ronald Reagan's scientific study team. Callahan and his staff presented everything they had and answered questions. When the meeting concluded, one of the CIA agents swore the participants to secrecy and told them this meeting never happened. The agents admitted the UFOs were not stealth bombers or any other military aircraft type. The CIA agents told Callahan they could not release this information to the American public because it would cause a panic. The CIA confiscated all the original voice recordings and radar tapes connected to the UFO incident, but they did not know Callahan had copies of everything at his office. Callahan said he believed Captain Terauchi saw 3 UFOs, and Reagan's scientific team agreed with him. They said this was the only time a UFO was recorded on radar for such an extended period. Commercial airline pilots again reported UFO sightings in Alaska's skies in January 1987, little more than 2 months after Captain Terauchi claimed he and his crew saw 3 UFOs. On January 29, 1987, the crew of Alaska Airlines Flight 53 sighted a fast-moving object on their onboard weather radar. The plane was flying at 35,000 feet and was approximately 60 miles west of McGrath on a flight from Nome to Anchorage. The crew calculated the UFO was moving at a speed of 18,000 miles per hour as it sped away from them. On January 30, 1987, a U.S. Air Force KC-135 jet traveling from Anchorage to Fairbanks sighted a huge UFO. Still, other than the recording of the conversation between the Air Force crew and Anchorage Center, little was relayed about this sighting. Over the years, individuals have reported countless other UFOs in the skies over Alaska, but none as well documented as the sighting by the crew of JAL 1628. Since 1998, there have been more than 560 UFO sightings reported in Alaska. In addition, hundreds of people have wandered into the Alaska wilderness and were never seen again. Some of these individuals come to Alaska unprepared for the harsh climate, rugged landscape, and wild animals, but even experienced outdoorsmen, mountain climbers, and boaters disappear here. Richard Lyman Griffiths from Spokane, Washington, invented a wilderness survival cocoon, and in the summer of 2006, he headed into the wilderness of southeast Alaska to test his invention. No one reported him missing for a year. When authorities began searching for him, they learned a bus dropped off Griffiths along the Alaska Highway. He stopped at a lodge near the White River, where he left some of his gear and told people he planned to hike upriver to McCarthy, a small town in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park. He was never seen again. Since Griffiths told friends he might spend the winter in Alaska, no one worried about him for several months. But finally, a friend called the Canadian Mounties and reported him missing. His friend had no idea where Griffiths was planning to go to test his wilderness cocoon. No trace has ever been found of Griffiths or his bright orange cocoon. Mountain climbing is a dangerous pursuit. In addition to Denali, the highest peak in North America, Alaska boasts many of the most challenging mountains and glaciers any daring alpinist could hope to conquer. Mountain climbers die every year in Alaska, but most climbers ascend in groups. If one or two members of the group tragically fall into a crevasse, their companions can tell the story about what happened to them. When a solo climber makes a fatal mistake, no one is there to record the details, and experts can only guess what happened. In 1984, Naomi Uemura, a famous Japanese adventurer and mountain climber, attempted a solo winter ascent of Denali. Uemura had already successfully summited Denali on his own, but he wanted to try a more challenging climb in the winter. He made it to the top on February 13, 1984, but something happened on his descent, and he never returned to base camp. Conditions near the top of Denali when Uemura disappeared included high winds and a temperature of minus 46 degrees Celsius. Such brutal conditions leave little room for human error. More recently, on March 7, 2018, two experienced climbers, Ryan Johnson and Marc-André Leclerc, failed to return from a climb on a 7-peaked mountain near Juneau. However, in this instance, searchers found a clue hinting at the fate of the two men. They found an intact anchor rope at the top of an ice chute on one peak, and then saw two climbing ropes in a crevasse, midway down the same peak. A spokesperson for the Alaska State Troopers said the evidence showed the climbers made it to the top and set an anchor. Then, she said, they were either taken out by an avalanche, a rope failed, or something else catastrophic occurred. As you see, there's no question more people, planes, and boats disappear in Alaska than anywhere else in the United States. Is something strange happening here? Or is this just a dangerous place with huge mountains, treacherous glaciers, roaring rivers, and violent storms? We just don't know. But the allure of the unknown itself continues to captivate the imagination of many, leading to ongoing speculation and fascination with the mysteries of the Alaska Triangle. That's all the information that we have for you today. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. We will see you next time. We will see you next time.